Picture the tropics going silent, then rumbling. A new strip of land, the Isthmus of Panama, stitches North and South America together. Jungle breaks into dry corridors, and hoofbeats, paws, and armored steps pour across. In our mind's camera, track a car-sized tank. Glyptotherium, a northern-dwelling glyptodont, descended from South American stock, trudging through dust toward Florida. This isn't one migration. It's waves, peaking near the late Pliocene, when climate and habitat flipped the switch. Predators chased, prey gambled, and the outcome was lopsided. Today, we're walking that road to see why more northerners conquered the South than the other way around. First, the gate itself. When did it truly close? Many lines of evidence point to a late Pliocene finish, roughly 3 to 3 million years ago, with a major migration pulse near about 2.5. That timing matches big climate shifts and savanna-like openings across Central America. But not everyone agrees. Some geological work argues parts of the bridge rose earlier, in the Miocene, a mosaic of islands and corridors before a solid span. The key is definitions, trickle versus highway. For our northbound Glyptotherium lineage, the highway era fits the fossil surge seen in the Pliocene and early Pleistocene. Now, meet the cast moving south. When the road opened, North American carnivores, cats, dogs, bears, and mustelids, marched down the spine of Central America. Ungulates followed. Deer, camels, horses, tapirs, peccaries, and even gomphoeggers. They hit new ecosystems like seasoned prose, shaped by long open country arms races. Meanwhile, from the south came the armor and claws, Caenorthrans. Giant ground sloths lumbered north. Armadillos and pampantheres clicked along. Glyptodonts, like Glyptotherium, crossed and adapted to grasslands that reached into the southern United States. Here's our first twist. More lineages from the north made it, established, and diversified in South America than vice versa. That can sound like northern superiority, but the data tell a deeper story. Quantitative models point to disproportionate extinctions among South America's native mammals as habitats changed. The playing field shifted under their feet, literally. Add sampling bias and staggered corridors, and the scoreboard starts to make sense. Our glyptodont still makes it north, but it does so into a landscape that was also getting cooler, more seasonal, and sometimes more open. Opportunities mixed with new risks. Let's ground this in fossils. In Arizona and across the southern US, museum collections record Glyptotherium, heavy dome of bone, tail like a mace, standing proof that South American armor didn't just cross, it settled. Florida's fossil sites are a time-lapse of the interchange. You find pampantheres like Homsina, armadillos such as Dasypus, giant sloths including Aramotherium, and, yes, our glyptodont cousins. Among the strangest arrivals, Titanus walleri, a towering terror bird that reached Florida and Texas. Sparse, debated, but real enough to picture a sprinting flightless predator testing new prey on new ground. Behavior tells us why armor worked. Glyptotherium wasn't built to outrun big cats. It was a walking fortress tuned to grasslands, grazing with low heads and thick keratin scales over bone plates. In a predator-rich North America, that matters. Cats and dogs probe for weak spots. Armor buys time. Add mass, over a ton in some forms, and you get a strategy. Deny the kill, outlast the ambush. Sloths used size and claws. Pampantheres used flexible armor and digging. These are southern toolkits entering a new arms race, meeting northern speed, pack tactics, and slicing teeth. Hold up? Why did waves come in pulses, not a steady stream? Central America acted like a holding pen. Lineages stacked up in Mexico and the tropics, waiting for climate windows. When rainfall patterns shifted and grasslands spread, the gate swung wider. That's when we see family-level crossings spike around the late Pliocene. Our Glyptodonts corridor didn't stay perfect. Forests closed, rivers rose, but in the sweet spots, herds and predators surged forward. The stop-and-go pattern explains why some groups show up early in the tropics, but only later in temperate zones. Second twist, birds joined the traffic. Molecular trees and fossils show avian swaps mirroring mammals after the land bridge completed. Multiple passerines and others hopped continents as habitats opened. It wasn't just hooves and armor. The sky lanes shifted too. But back on the ground, our Glyptodont trudges through seasonal dust, breath steaming at dawn in a cooler Pleistocene morning, nose to the wind, following grasses that now carpet river flats in what will become the American South. The interchange wasn't only about predators and prey. It rewired entire food webs. Let's stack the marquee migrants, north to south: felids, canids, bears, mustelids, deer, camels, horses, tapirs, peccaries, even gomphotheres. South to north: xenarthrans, giant sloths, armadillos, pamphotheres, and glyptodonts like Glyptotherium. Titanus edges north into Florida and Texas. In the fossil record, Florida shines because it samples so well. Trackways, limb bones, and shells map the advance. Our Glyptodont's dome shows weathering lines, a lifetime of scrapes from river cobbles, and maybe the odd probing bite that failed to find purchase. Third twist, the clock itself is controversial. Some researchers see clues for a much earlier connection in zircon grains and tectonic reconstructions, arguing the seaway's doorway might have shut by the Middle Miocene. Others counter with marine evidence, currents and species that still mixed until 3 to 4 million years ago, and a strong case for late Pliocene final closure. Either way, the highway conditions that power our Glyptodonts' northward push lineup, with that later window and the big climatic gears clicking into place, what tipped the balance southward for northern predators? Imagine a mosaic, patches of new savanna, drying trends, and unfamiliar prey. North American carnivores, evolved on open fields with tough competitors, slot into these niches fast. Meanwhile, many South American native hoofed mammals face both new hunters and changing plants. Extinctions spike. The asymmetry emerges. But it's not a steamroll. Some southern newcomers thrive. Glyptotherium spreads into the southwest and Gulf Coast, grazing under thorn scrub, wallowing at muddy seeps, leaving armored shells to fossilize in river bends when floods undercut the banks. Zoom in on one Florida floodplain at low water. In the damp sand, a pattern of prints, wide claw-tipped impressions from a giant sloth that foraged here last season, crossed by heavier rounded tracks from a Glyptodont that hugged the shoreline. Nearby, a scatter of deer prints tells us northern prey used the same corridor. This is how the interchange writes itself. Layered signatures of movement, pressed into mud, then sealed by silt. Our Glyptodont's path isn't a straight arrow. It's a loop of feeding grounds that expands northward as winters bite just a little harder each millennium. The ocean story flips too. When the isthmus rose, it pinched off a seaway and rerouted currents. That mattered for marine life, but it also reshaped climates on land, strengthening seasonality. Savanna corridors flare and fade. The holding pen fills and empties. Our Glyptodont herd calves in the dry season, and banks on armored young surviving the first year. Predators test, learn, and sometimes fail. Each skirmish leaves marks, chips on scutes, healed rib fractures. Across tens of thousands of years, these small dramas scale into range maps drawn on museum shelves. What do collections actually show? At the Smithsonian, records of Glyptotherium from the southern U.S. anchor the northward footprint of this lineage. National park sites preserve ground sloth remains and even trackways, slow-motion postcards from the interchange. In Florida's museum bulletins, arrival lists cluster in the late Pliocene into the early Pleistocene. Pamphotheres, armadillos, Erematherium, Titanus. The pattern matches the broader pulse. Our Glyptodonts shell, once a living fortress in a muddy oxbow, becomes data, cataloged, dated, compared across states to test the narrative we're tracing right now. So, was the Great American Biotic Interchange a fair fight? Not exactly. The scoreboard is tilted by extinctions and environment, not just by who had sharper teeth. North to south invaders found openings in altered South American landscapes. South to north migrants, especially xenarthrans like our Glyptodont, succeeded where armor, size, or digging translated into survival on cooler, more seasonal plains. It's less about dominance than timing plus tools. The land bridge didn't just connect continents, it exposed winners and losers when climates rolled the dice. If you could cross that bridge once, as predator or prey, which side would you risk first?